Saad, Teri, and Heather. Without the microphone, people online can't hear. So.
For the Q&A. Oh, yeah, but you're up first. Oh, yeah.
Thank you again, everybody, for coming. Big shout out to Jess and Type Books for hosting us. Without them, honestly, we would be nowhere. We would be virtual still. So I'm so grateful, Jess. Thank you. Kaylee, the inimitable Kaylee, our event coordinator, without whom I would be completely lost. Thank you. And Heather Wood, who's here, our curatorial support, again, without whom, I don't know where we would be. And Heather, Saad, and Teri, thank you so much for coming. I've known you were all coming for quite some time, and you have no idea how hard it is to have a TBR pile that I know I have to read, but that I can't read until close to the date because I have a brain that just does not remember very long. Anyway, and thank you all for coming, and thank you for joining us online. I would like to acknowledge where we are today. We open with a land acknowledgement as a reminder that we exist here in a country called Canada because of the colonial actions of the settlers who came before us. Colonialism, occupation, and genocide should not be an acceptable part of our collective histories. Junction Reads exists in what we now call Toronto, which is covered under Treaty 13 and the Williams Treaties. It is the traditional land of the Haudenosaunee Confederacy, the Wendat, and the Anishinaabe, including the Chippewas and the Mississaugas of the Credit. We recognize the continued displacement and colonization of First Nations peoples across Turtle Island, and we are very grateful to work in the community on their territory. Reconciliation requires more than this acknowledgement. We must consistently and mindfully recognize our colonial history and accept the responsibility to care for the land, its resources, and all the people who were here before us. Heather Birrell. This is one of those books. I went to Heather's launch, and you have no idea what it feels like to have that book. So it's just sitting there waiting for me. Heather Birrell is the author of the Gerald Lampert Award-winning poetry collection, Float and Scurry, and 2 short story collections, Mad Hope, and I Know You Are, But What Am I? Heather's work has been honored with the Journey Prize for Short Fiction, the Edna Staebler Award for Creative Nonfiction, and ARC Magazine's Reader's Choice Award. She has been shortlisted for the K.M. Hunter Award and both National and Western Magazine Awards in Canada. Heather's essay about motherhood appeared in the M Word, an anthology that broadens the conversation about what mothering means today, and an essay about postpartum depression was a notable mention in Best American Essays in 2017. Born, a gorgeous novel, was published this year by Coach House Books. Heather, thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Junction Reads. Thank you, Allison. Thank you, Type Books. I adore this bookstore and I love this neighborhood. So I'm so happy to be here today, reading and hearing other readers and hopefully having a great discussion about some wonderful books. I'm going to read from a section of Born that is about like a quarter of the way through. So for those of you who don't know, the premise of the novel is there is a grade 12 English teacher whose name is Elise, who is very pregnant. And as the novel opens, a lockdown is called in the school. And she realizes quite soon after this happens, and sort of somewhat reluctantly, that she's actually going into labor. So the novel is told from lots of different points of view, from Elise, the English teacher's point of view, but also from the point of view of a few different students, one of whom is the reason why the lockdown is called, and a couple who sort of become her unofficial midwives along the way, and also from the perspective of the class of students as a collective. So I'm going to read a section from Elise's point of view and then from the point of view of the sort of in this collective voice. What you need to know right now is that she's just started having these contractions and she's sent one of the students to get another student to time them. Said, okay, this guy's going to be good at time. So, Elise. Cheyenne has returned with Ryan in tow, and sure enough, his watch is well suited. It has many functions and buttons only he knows how to operate. Good call, miss, says Cheyenne grudgingly. He knows what to do. Just tell him when one starts and when it ends. Ryan crouches awkwardly at my feet. Come sit up here, I tell him. I point to the space next to my belly. He presses his watch buttons and they beep in response. Then he waddles up, rocks back onto his bum. Are you in pain, miss? Nah, not yet, but I will be. I need you to not mind too much about that, okay? I need you only and always to do your job. Can you do that? Can you do that for me, Ryan? Yes. He caresses the face of his watch. Okay, good. You know how I am with time. It's true. I am forever being interrupted mid-thought by the bell, entreating them all to stay put while I hurriedly assign reading or offer reminders. There is another noise from the hallway, a new shuffling loudness. We pause again in our actions, as if the needle has been lifted from the record. Oh God, I groan, quite loudly I imagine, as another contraction overtakes me. I give Ryan a signal, how I'm not sure, and he begins to time, pressing the button with authority. The contraction takes me, squeezes myself out. When I come back, there is a soft rhythmic sound coming from the region of the door. Is someone knocking? I ask Fatima. My vision is hazy and I expect my hearing is also fuzzy. I do not trust my senses to report back accurately from the outside world anymore. The sound comes again, more percussive and insistent this time. Yes, says Cheyenne, some motherfucking asshole is knocking. And it comes to me, like the memory of a dream comes in dragging threads and tendrils, that this is Samara knocking. Samara, I say to Ryan, who looks down at his watch, places the pads of his fingers on the buttons. It's Samara. I have turned to Cheyenne now, who is sucking her teeth. You have to let her in. Fatima is the one who passes the word down the row of kids. It is novel to them, this message being handed along without the benefit of electronics. It is intimate. Heads lean softly into ears, lips approach with the breathy message. It's Samara, let her in. When the message reaches Mark, who is closest to the door, I watch a transformation occur. He has been playing a video game, jaw clenched in concentration, but now the jaw slackens. He turns to confirm with the speaker, who nods and points up to the door. We know the risk we are taking, the risk we have transferred to his shoulders, broad and young and innocent as they may be. I can see the realization when it hits his eyes. He stands deliberately, a cat burglar or a Marine. I want to laugh. I'm so proud of him. I taught him before, when he was a different boy, an earlier, angrier boy. In grade 10, he would write me journal entries about his grandmother, whom he adored, but not much else. When he came to class, it was to skulk in the corner, hoodie pulled forward like a monk. His was the kind of anger that surrounded him like a fog. It was hard to see him through the scrim, and he squinted up at me as if I were unreal or an intrusion, which I suppose I was. Once, when I got exasperated because he would not put away his phone or meet my eye, he stood up and upended his desk. The movement was fluid and frightening. He stalked out of the room, and I let him. When the hall monitor asked what had happened, I was at a loss. History happened, I wanted to say. The one time Mark did not write about his grandmother, he wrote about his skin. I pinned the 3 scrawled sentences to my bulletin board. Being Black is like a job I do every single fucking day. When I wake up and go out the door, when I get on the bus, when I hang out with my friends, when I go to the corner store, when I come to school, I'm doing my job. When I don't do my job properly, I get punished. And most of the time, I have no fucking clue how to do my job. Mark lifts the corner of the chart paper to peer out, a quick pick at the masking tape with his fingernail, and up it comes, a little flap flipped up to show us the world, just as quickly pressed down again. He turns toward us, his audience. It's Samara, he confirms. A racket of birdsong erupts from the courtyard. Another world exists, but it is not our world. Mark meets my eye. Open it, I say, let her in. He breathes in shallowly, a breath that does not reach his diaphragm but balloons his pecs impressively. Then he reaches for the door handle, turns it, reaches out, and pulls Samara inside. Samara falls at his feet, a pile of faded blue jeans, fuchsia glasses, hijabbed bun, and Peter Pan boots. Also, many rolls of toilet paper and a pile of brown institutional paper towel. She pushes herself up and scans the room until she finds me. Hey, miss, it's been a minute. I nod. Is it true? I raise my eyebrows. Why is she making this into a coffee shop conversation? Is it true you're having your baby? I nod again. The other students, even the ones who know, turn to me with WTF all over their faces. Sorry, I say, I can't control it. How did you know? Samara shrugs. Cheyenne texted me. That's why I brought these. She prods at the toilet rolls with her foot. I heard him. The intruder, I mean. He passed by the bathroom. I think maybe someone was with him. The anxious uplift at the end of her sentence, the catch in her voice. She is feigning nonchalance. God, what it must cost them to know it all when you have lived so little. It is possible I will have my baby here. Some brash teenager will catch her in a scratchy ass paper towel. And Jesus, I want my husband so badly I can feel it in my cunt. I can't help it. I begin to cry. Fatima notices first. A Siberian friend once explained to me the notion of skinless people in her Aboriginal culture. I suspect Fatima is one of these people, vulnerable to the world in a way that is both wondrous and dangerous. It's okay, miss. We'll take care of you. And we'll probably get out of here soon, get you to a hospital. I mean, it takes a long time to have a baby. It is both discomforting and oddly cheering to feel the reversal that has occurred, to witness her attempts at reassuring me. You have another child though, right, miss? This your second? Cheyenne asks. Yes, I say, surprised at my meekness in offering up this information. I have a 7-year-old, Joey. So your body knows what to do. Could be quick. Cheyenne appraises me reproachfully. I shrug. I'll take it. The comfort, the reproach. I don't have much choice. Fatima is frowning at her phone. My dad is texting, she says. What do I tell him? Tell him we are all safe, I say, suddenly again authoritative. Tell him we will let him know when the lockdown is lifted. Tell him he should check the school website, call the number specifically designated for this situation. The words feel hollow and bullshitty, even to my own ears. What about, says Fatima and points to my belly. God, no, I mean, just tell him you are fine. I am surprised at my own adamancy. Is it denial? An ill-timed bid for privacy? A preference for the devil I know? Maybe. Or I want to protect those on the outside from what is happening. What the fuck is happening here? Someone has pinned up a comic over the photocopier in the staff room. Two people with large blocky bodies and rectangular heads leaning toward each other in a booth at a diner, sharing confidences. I went into teaching because I've always loved crazy parents, says one to the other. Ha, the parents are crazy, some of them more than others, granted. What a strange thing to suddenly find myself among them, to realize there are things I would do for my own children, unthinkable things. Bizarre, isn't it? How every experience we have, no matter how small and inconsequential, invites us into a society of others, a new slew of humanity. Aha, here you are, welcome to the club. Oh, your dad had a heart attack? My dad had a heart attack. And me too. I also got drunk on peach schnapps when I was 14. Yes, they follow me in the dollar store too. Next time, go with a white friend. Different story, fan. I experience a transcendent joy when I am anywhere near a birch tree. You too? Ass slapped, tit pinched, check, check. And now? My kid had pinworms too. Greetings, comrade. You know it comes from eating poo, right? So gross. Hello, friend. It is perhaps old-fashioned to believe that we are all part of a whole. Much more seemly these days for us to stay standing in our silos, unknowable. But there it is. I got into teaching for the crazy parents. I am a crazy parent. I remember the first time I understood Joey to be completely separate from me, a universe unto himself. He was almost 3, still in his cot. I had stroked his back, sung my catalog of songs with great feeling, only occasionally feigned. And in my mind, I was already out the door, down the stairs, checking emails, switching the laundry over. Mama, he said after I'd bid him good night, do that smile for me, the bedtime smile. My God, I thought, the kid knows my repertoire of smiles. To be known, to be observed like that, it is deeply flattering and unnerving. I mustered my best, gazing down at child's smile, and I passed the test somehow. I passed. Still, I know there will come a day when the answers I offer will feel ragged, incomplete, or worse still, like outright lies. I think of this and the inevitable ways we let down our children when I reread Mark's words or when I wash up on the shores of 3 a.m. some restless nights. It is in these moments I question this whole project I have embarked upon, this business of growing and birthing new humans. What in heaven's name was I thinking? I was thinking of animal smells and skin-to-skin closeness, balls thrown, fumbled, caught, bedtime stories in perpetuity. I was not thinking about social media's strange byways, hormonal surges and slammed doors, of droughts, fires, pandemics, an atmosphere rife with curses and carcinogens. It terrifies me, the road I see stretching out before me, and the inextricability of these bonds I am forging. This job I can never, ever quit. I feel another contraction coming and elbow Ryan harder than is warranted in the ribs. All of my fortune telling and forensic philosophizing evaporates while I'm in the contraction's clutch. I fixate on a group of students huddled over by the radiator. Are they cold? No, they are pointing at me, making large gestures. When the contraction finally subsides, I understand what is happening. They are making a plan. ENG 4U103. Someone starts a group chat so we can make a plan. The plan centers on creating a flexible human shield to smuggle Miss out of the building. It is not a very honed plan, and there seem to be shifting parameters. Its leaders are various and constantly changing in the group chat that has been created to contain and further the plan. There are discussions about exits and possible weapons and stealth maneuvers. There are arguments about who is best suited for which role in the escape. There are memes to break up the relentlessness of the texts. The memes are ironic. The memes often involve possums or hedgehogs. We misunderstand each other and use caps to yell our rage and for emphasis because this is an emergency. We wonder what we will do if the baby gets stuck, because that is something that happens, we have heard. We wonder what our parents are thinking, or we share their panic texts and the NBD ways we have responded. We wonder, is it true? Has the intruder taken a hostage? We try to stay on track, on message, on brand. This is a planning thread. How can we smuggle Miss past the shooter to safety? We are not thinking about ourselves or our mortality or our need for love and acceptance and all the things we have yet to experience and accomplish. Methinks the lady doth protest too much. One of us complains that this is all Mrs. fault anyway. And another says, no, it's just fate. It's no one's fault. And another one says, yeah, but who controls our fate, dumbass? And someone else says, God. And someone else says, I don't think so. And someone else says, I'm a Gemini, so fate is kind of neither here nor there. And someone else says, are you hungry? And someone else says, it's only been 1 hour, 45 minutes. And someone else says, actually 1 hour, 47 minutes. And someone else says, can we get back to the plan? And someone else says, we can't let him in. And someone else says, we've got to get her out. And then a possum holding a machine gun. Oh.
Thank you so much, Heather. Anytime I think about swear words in my writing, I read books like that and I go, yes. They are very good words. Thanks again. Saad Omar Khan was born in the United Arab Emirates to Pakistani parents and lived in the Philippines, Hong Kong, and South Korea before immigrating to Canada. He is a graduate of the University of Toronto and the London School of Economics and has completed a certificate in creative writing from the School of Continuing Studies at U of T, where he was a finalist for the Random House Creative Writing Award and for the Marina Nemat Award. In 2019, he was longlisted for the Guernica Prize for Literary Fiction. His short fiction has appeared in Best Canadian Stories 2025 and other publications. Drinking the Ocean was recently published by Woolsack and Wynne. Saad, welcome.
The perfect height. Yeah, there we go. I've been waiting a long time to come here, and thank you so much for the opportunities to have me. So the way that I usually talk about this book is my editor once said that I love this book because it's a love story. And I had to correct him to say that from my perspective, it is a love story, but more than that, it's also a story about love. But spiritual love, it's about romantic love, about eternal love, and everything in between. So usually when I do readings, I always start somewhere in the middle, but I'm going to do something really different, which is I'm going to start at the very beginning. So just for some context, this book is about the story between the relationship of two Pakistani Canadians who meet first in London while they both doing graduate studies. The inciting incident is when Murad, one of the main characters, sees Sophie, somebody he fell in love with, back in the mid-2000s, back in London, in Dundas Square. So I'm going to start at that very point with chapter 1, when we see him see her for the first time in 8 years. It had been 7 years since Murad last saw Sophie when she appeared again, a spectre made flesh, a haunting thought turned into luminous form. It was a Sunday, the night after his 33rd birthday party. Murad was on his way to the subway, headed to see his friend Marco. He couldn't understand why Sophie's name looped endlessly spoke their thoughts in his mind. It was the moment of transition when she entered his mind the most, imagining her life and all the permutations of what it could be now. Thinking of her was dangerous. Here in Toronto, after they had last spoken, he made a covenant with himself, a pledge to let her flow freely away from his soul. Yet now, when he let his thoughts go on unrestrained, he fantasized about meeting her, sitting down to speak and talk and connect the way he used to in those shining moments when he first met her in London. And what would be the use of seeing her again? Would they talk over coffee, of lives continued in each other's absence, of marriage and work and God's fate? Would they speak without his wife Samra knowing, a thought that buoyed him with energy as much as it shamed him? He couldn't even be certain of where she was now. Sophie was uncontainable. The possibilities where she lived innumerable. Still in Toronto, where they last met. In London, where he first loved her. In myriad parts unknown. He was subdued by jealousy. Thinking of the refined life he was convinced she led. The men who were partners. The family she would have begun. Since he'd last seen her, in the years after he'd settled, found a career, made a home with his new wife, he still held her in his soul, concocting alternative versions of his life where she was always there, the singular thread that wove through his reveries. There would be no daydreaming for the rest of the day, thought Murad before the subway stop at St. Patrick's Station. Marco would be a distraction. He was a former colleague who had worked briefly with Murad in the communications department of the bank before he left and went into business for himself. They were friends of a sort, the type of adult friendship born from shared work experiences that one feels the need to continue long after professional connections ended, an acquaintance that solidified out of a sense of habit and familiarity. He was younger than Murad, awkward but sincere and well-meaning. Marco reminded him of the stream of relationships that had passed through his life, the constant entropy of friends lost and gained. Coming out of the subway, crossing the wide avenue and walking the crowded streets under the merciless sun, he thought of how few friends he had, social engagements being limited by time or the pull of Samra back home. He realized how many of what counted as friends were hers, even if, out of a sense of generosity, she described them as our friends, friends of our family. Murad walked towards Dundas Square, passing dim sum restaurants and a Japanese bakery where, even on weekends, a caterpillar-like line curved out the front door for people to buy overpriced cheesecake. He found the boutique easily, a European cafe where Marco wanted to meet. Marco was already seated when Murad walked in. Marco waved him over and embraced him enthusiastically when he came to the table. He had an unexpected guest, a petite, dark-haired woman sitting in one of the cafe's many tan-colored swivel chairs. "This is Laura, my fiancée," said Marco as she rose to shake Murad's hand. "I hope you don't mind that you tagged along." He didn't mind, of course, even if he found it strange, feeling as if Laura's presence was more purposeful than just a lack of alternative plans on her part. They ordered French toast and eggs. Marco updated Murad on the freelance editorial business that he had started with Laura, a business partnership that had given way to a romantic one. Marco was talkative and effervescent, Laura polite, poised, and quiet. He interspersed his enthusiasm for his life with questions about Samra and how Murad enjoyed married life. "Good," said Murad. "Well, more than good, great." Laura excused herself and left the table. Marco, briefly silent and contemplative, leaned close to Murad from his chair. "Between us, is it worth it? I mean, marriage." "I'd say it is," said Murad. "If you make the sacrifices to make it worth it. How can you tell?" He thought carefully before answering. "For me, it was a way of starting over," said Murad, pausing for a moment, realizing his answer was less a response to Marco and more of a means of self-justification, a wall to keep Sophie from climbing over. Laura returned, staring at her phone as Murad and Marco spoke. They had business to attend to, she said. They finished their meals quickly. As Marco paid for the group, "My birthday treats," he said. Murad realized how the brunch was an excuse for Marco to introduce him to Laura, almost as a seeking validation. They said goodbye outside the restaurant. Before they walked away, Marco put his hand on Murad's shoulder and turned to Laura. "I'm glad you got to meet Murad," he said. "He's one of the finest people I know." Murad smiled, genuinely touched. He's slightly taken aback by the compliment. Without aim or direction, with only desire to walk and not to return home, Murad headed to the square, thinking of how and why he had become so highly regarded in his friend's eyes. He remembered moments when they worked together, private conversation at lunch or after work, drinking coffee where he'd learned of Marco's life, his history of childhood stammering, bullying, loneliness, struggles at school, struggles finding work and companionship. He had the sense that Marco trusted him, an open heart available to someone who found those traits tragically rare. There was room once for a connection, to be a comfort for people. His heart blossomed with the sense that Sophie would have been proud of that sense of empathy that she had seen in him all those years back. It was a thought that wounded Murad, a reminder of days when he'd wanted to share so much more than compassion or empathy with Sophie. Words that wilted under the weight of his feelings for her. Murad reached the square. His eyes wandered from the billboards to a familiar face in the crowd across the street. He stared at her, the torch of recognition burning brighter. It was her, Sophie. Murad's eyes squinted under the sun's glare. She stood at the edge of the curb, anonymous bodies flanking her sides. A current ran through his heart as she glanced in his direction. The light changed, the rush of pedestrians started, and he stood watching as Sophie crossed the street. In the interminable seconds it took for her to stride through the congested crowd, he wondered whether he should make his presence known, whether to extend his hands to touch her, tap her on the shoulder, reignite conversations and cross lines once again. A space opened in the crowd. Sophie came within a few feet of Murad. She took no notice of him, as if he were one more cipher in a sea of faces. Her eyes, black as the universe, were unencumbered by sunglasses. Her face seemed hairy but warm and confident, small lines speaking to the force of age that only heightened her flawlessness. Beside her was a boy, a dusky-faced toddler, eyes as large as Sophie's that sparkled with the same mystery as her own. He held a small ice cream cone in his left hand, the other hand holding Sophie's as they walked past. Murad stood still as pedestrians brushed against him, his head fixed forward without looking back to see what direction they went in. The clarity of the encounter overwhelmed him, that the child at her side was hers, the maternal Sophie he'd never known when he first loved her. Daydreams had taken form, that face, her dark eyes, all brought into relief, with every step of his life leading to the present. Don't look back, he thought to himself. The wife of Hazrat Lut, the prophet Lot, was destroyed for looking back at the home she once possessed. It was a childhood story his mother once told him that Murad pondered as he walked toward the shade of the subway's entrance in the middle of the square. He climbed down the stairs, passing groups of children and a few worn adults grabbing the railing as they trudged up to the surface. The train waiting for him would bring him uptown, where his wife waited, to the apartment where they shared a life, into the darkness of the stairwell before being bathed in the artificial lights of the yellow tile platform. He hoped he could cleanse his mind of Sophie again, even though he knew the impossibility of forgetting all he'd surrendered in the past. Time frays the edges of memory. It's one of the benefits of age, the way the years dilute the past. But Sophie didn't exist in those edges. Even as the light of the past dimmed, she was always there, shining in the center of Murad's mind. It was Samra who organized the surprise party the night before he saw Sophie. She had invited a handful of their friends, Jamal and Sarah, Omar and Nilufar, a former colleague from the bank of Thea and her husband. Their gifts were food and dessert, and the night was spent eating, talking as a warm July breeze drifted from the windows of their apartment. They cut the cake afterward, Samra taking it from the fridge and placing it at the edge of their lone table. Happy 33rd birthday, Murad, written with white frosting on a chocolate backdrop. The friends took pictures of the evening, Samra and Murad's arms around each other's waists, his wife feeding him a lone morsel of the first slice. He'd helped her clean up after the guests later in the evening, a wordless assembly line of trash gathered and plates cleaned and dried. Domestic order gave finality to the evening. The dishes given to them by Samra's pupo, the dessert forks from the cutlery set his mother's cousin brought for the wedding, all were laid out delicately to dry in a towel next to the wash basin, displayed like a testament to the beginning of their marriage. They went to bed quickly after Samra said her prayers. The lights went out, and she put her hand on Murad's heart, as if checking for its beat. She's become livelier, he thought to himself. Even with people she'd known well, Samra shied away from large gatherings. She seemed pleased with the party, as if finding one more tool to be happy. She'd been sad for too long. Murad felt proud of her, proud of their marriage, even if that pride coexisted with the presence of Sophie in his life, a memory that lay in their bed like a third body. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Saad. I'm so glad that you mentioned spirituality. If you're anything like me and you read books, all you want to do is talk about them with people. And we had a conversation last night about your representation of faith as so calm and so beautiful. I loved it. It's my favorite. Teri Vlassopoulos, thank you so much for coming. Teri is the author of Living Expenses, Escape Plans, and Bats or Swallows, all from Invisible Publishing. Her fiction and nonfiction have been published in Room Magazine, Today's Parent, Catapult, The Millions, The Rumpus, The Toast, Open Book, and more. She has been nominated for the Danuta Gleed Literary Award, and she sits on the board of directors of the Festival of Literary Diversity. Teri lives in Toronto. Thank you for coming.
Thank you. Thank you, Junction Reads and Allison. I love this reading series, and the care that Allison puts into reading these books and putting these together makes it a very special series that we have in Toronto. Thank you to everyone who's here. It's a very hard day, I think, to be out in the world after the last day. So thank you for that. I guess if you're online, not going to thank you for that, but you're probably making the right choice. Stay at home. So I'm going to read from Living Expenses. I kind of love that I'm reading last. I think it's a good bookend after Heather's reading, which is about the beginning of pregnancy. And this book is about fertility. And I'm going to read a section that it's sort of like winding it back and at the very beginning of when someone is trying to have a baby. So the only thing you need to know in this part, it's really a section about the main character, Laura, and her husband, Joe. And actually, that's all you need to know about this. So let's start. I sometimes wonder if I have a karmic tax to pay. Joe and I married young, and we found our home faster than usual in Toronto's aggressive real estate market. Because of the relative quickness of those major life events, it made sense to me that something else, like getting pregnant, might take longer than usual. It's probably a time debt, I told Joe. That's not how things work, though. But maybe it is. It was the only way I could think to reply. I'd become hyper-aware of my menstrual cycle. I was naive about things when I stopped taking the pill. I figured pregnancy would just happen. But after a miscarriage, I decided I didn't have the liberty to be clueless anymore. I read Taking Charge of Your Fertility and began monitoring my cervical mucus, which changes throughout your cycle, and at your most fertile point is supposed to have the consistency of egg whites. I'd start the day by inserting my index finger inside myself towards my cervix so I could examine the viscosity of the mucus on it. This isn't gross, I tell myself. These are normal bodily secretions that society has conditioned me to feel alienated from. But I was a little repulsed anyway, until one morning I felt it, the fertile, liquidy milkiness between my finger and thumb, and I knew I was on the right track, that this was part of the payment plan to get us where we needed to be. I also replaced my menstrual cycle app with another one that I'd read about online that was specifically geared towards conception. It had a bright pink and white color scheme. I spent one morning in bed, ignoring my alarm, to import the first and last days of my period into it, going back a few months before having a miscarriage. When I was done, an estimated ovulatory calendar populated before me. Period dates for the next year blocked out in crimson, fertile days marked in green. Actual ovulation, a single day, was indicated by a pink flower. All other days were blank. The goal during the green phase, the 5 days leading up to the ovulation period, was to have as much sex as possible so that by the time ovulation occurred, flower time, the egg would be surrounded on all sides by sperm, ready to be invaded. During my first month of using the app, I kept track of my inner workings with an intensity and an eye for detail that I didn't know I was capable of. I was psyched for the green phase, and then it came, as it were. That first night, Joe and I had good, vigorous, life-affirming and producing sex. During my lunch break the next day, I went to the closest grocery store to buy a whole pineapple. I read online that pineapple improved the odds of becoming pregnant because it was rich in bromelain, a mixture of enzymes that acted as both an anti-inflammatory and a blood thinner that was helpful if you wanted an embryo to implant into your endometrium. It even had a slogan, nature's aspirin. You couldn't eat the pineapple any old way for it to work, though. It had to be done specifically by dividing the whole pineapple, including its tough woody core, into 5 to 8 pieces. It depended on what source I consulted, and then eating it one piece daily after potential implantation. At the grocery store, the pineapples were kept in a corner with other exotic fruit. A few slightly shriveled star fruits, Asian pears wrapped in protective netting, giant pomelos, and a small pile of dark globes that I recognized as mangosteens. I'd eaten mangosteen years before in Thailand on vacation with Joe. I'd never seen the deep purple tennis ball shaped fruit before, and I'd been delighted by the soft white segments under the tough outer shell. Maybe I thought if I brought a few now, I could save them for the end of the pineapple treatment when, after bombarding my system with bromelains, I'd get a positive pregnancy test. It would be a callback, a reward. When I got home from work, I put the handful of mangosteens in a bowl on the counter, then took out my big knife to peel and chop the pineapple. I popped the first cube in my mouth and chewed and chewed and chewed on the core, mildly sweet and mostly fibrous. That night, the second green day, the sex was good. On the third day, we were both tired. Joe had spent the evening recording a podcast episode, and by the time he came to bed, I was already dozing off. I looked at my app. We were a few days out from the flower, so it was probably fine to skip a night, and it was almost a relief to give ourselves that permission. But then when I woke up the next morning, I was self-conscious. Was it a bad sign that we weren't able to muster the enthusiasm to have sex 3 days in a row? I Googled how often couples in long-term relationships have sex. I found answers that made me feel better and ignored the ones that didn't. That evening, when I started kissing Joe, he said, "I get the feeling you're using me." And I tried to turn it into something hot, but I didn't mean it that way. I was just tired again, and just wanted to get on with things. So we did it half-heartedly. I thought of a friend who told me that she knew the exact night that she and her husband had conceived their baby because they truly made love. If our baby was conceived as a result of this evening, I wouldn't be able to say that, but sperm is sperm. On ovulation day, I consulted the app. And there wasn't only a small flower icon, but also an interface transformed into a full screen field of exploding foliage. A butterfly fluttered back and forth. If there was a day to have sex, good sex, perfunctory sex, whatever, this is it. I showed Joe the field of flowers. I'm ovulating. If we don't do it tonight, we have to wait. I looked at the app, 29 days. Our sex was desperate and kind of sad, but I cheered afterwards, weekly. We did it. By that point, my mangosteens were already eaten. I don't know why I thought they would last the entire duration of the pineapple period. They were already getting soft when I brought them home. Instead of having them go to waste, I'd eat them all at once. And as I ate each mild-tasting segment, I worried that I tempted fate by eating them too soon. But I thought of Joe saying, that's not how things work. The next 2 weeks were agonizingly slow. One day I walked home from work and my breasts were heavy in my shirt. Do they hurt? I wondered. They did. That was a good sign. I looked at myself in the mirror after a shower. They looked bigger. Later that night, I asked Joe if my breasts looked bigger, and he said that he couldn't tell, and then we had sex, or rather we made love, probably feeling released from the pressure of preparing for ovulation. I also joined an online support message board for women trying to conceive. The act was shortened to the acronym TTC, which is confusingly the same as my city's public transportation system. I knew that Joe, who was interested in anything vaguely adjacent to public transportation, would find it amusing, but I didn't tell him about it. I was too much in the weeds of TTCing to joke about how similarly long and slow and painful it was compared to table reads. I did privately acknowledge that the vocabulary of these message boards was amusing. I trawled posts discussing endless details about mucus, linings, what age was considered geriatric, which is 35, and it all sounded ridiculous. But then I just got used to it. It was simply new language, and there were other more important things to focus on. Joe, who did not research or peruse message boards, was still at the point where it was easier to think of these details as a salient point, the punchline to the joke. The day my period started, one day before its predicted date, I logged in the app. The calendar reset to day one, and everything shifted slightly in accordance with this new entry in the data set. I now thought about time on an acute level, like a child crossing days off a calendar leading up to Christmas. I was completely absorbed by it. And I'll end there.
Join us up here with it. I'll get the tripping hazard. Thank you so much, Teri. Again, the one of the, not startling, that word, but one of the surprising things about this book was the intimacy. I come from an extremely body intimate family. People who know me know that my family's weirdly intimate, but reading this, honestly, I was texting my sister. We are in a book.
Yeah.
Okay, let's get 4 to 10. So I'm gonna start. I have an individual question for each of you, and then general questions, if that's okay. Heather, my first question is for you. It's writerly curiosity, I think, more than anything. As I was reading, I thought of you as a teacher. I thought of your students, thinking Miss is a teacher or is a writer. Miss wrote a book about a classroom. And I just wanted to talk to you about that, your relationship with your students and whether they know you're a writer and whether they read your stuff and ask you about it.
So yes, they do know I'm a writer, although it's not something, I wouldn't say advertise it broadly. I do talk about it, especially in sort of writer's craft classes and that kind of thing. I'm a little wary about sort of outing myself as a writer, partly because it's a different part of my life. It's a completely different part of my life. It feels like something I want to guard in a way. And also because, there have been times when I have shared, my own poems in class when we've been talking about poetry. And I feel like it puts my students in a strange position because I don't want them to feel like they have to say they like the poem, or I think, there's a power dynamic there. So having said that, I did, when we were looking at different covers, I did sort of put them up on, on the screen, and we talked about, I got them to vote on which cover they liked the best, that kind of thing. So they had some input in that, and they were excited about that. And when I was doing the audiobook, Cheyenne, there's some sections in Cheyenne's voice where she goes back to Jamaica, and so they're in Jamaican dialect. And so I had one of my students help me with some of that dialect. And so she read some sections, and I remember feeling so flattered because she read a section and she just kind of looked at me and went, oh, you're funny. And she seemed to really relate to the character. So that was really nice. And other than that, I don't know. Like, I have had some feedback from them and they've said they liked it, but I feel a little bit, like I said, a little bit strange about it because of that very thing. And I have to say, I feel weird about the fact that if they are somehow conflating this character, at least with me, and reading it, and then like there's a scene where she thinks about having pregnant sex with her husband, and I'm like, oh my god. So yeah,
I did sort of think that if they did conflate you with Elise, that for me, Elise is a great teacher. She comes across as a great person, a great teacher. So I kind of had that. Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, say it.
Part of the novel too is about sort of breaking down those, like, what is a student and what is a teacher, and the teacher can be a lot more than this box that they put them in, and a student can be more than that too. So I wanted to kind of trouble that, but then boundaries are also there for a reason.
Thank you. Saad, just expanding on the spirituality, there is a deep exploration of spirituality in the book. Connection to poetry and the language in the Quran that speaks to doubt or the questioning of one's faith, one's purpose in life. And I wanted you to talk about that a little bit more, how important it was for you to present the struggle, as your words are, the mystery of this spinning life, which I loved. As you write the question, like we are all thinking every day, why are we here?
So when I was writing this book, it was obviously from a very personal place. At the same time, I also knew that I'm writing with a political subtext there. When you are a Muslim in the West, your identity, especially in the past 20 odd years, is always somewhat suspect. And especially in the literary world, while we are moving more towards, the discourse around diversity and pluralism, there's still this idea that if you write about Muslim characters, you have to write them one way. And if you write about Muslim characters investigating faith, you also have to write them one way. And I often find that way tends to be this binary between, secularism, a more liberal way of thinking the world, and a more religious conservative way of the world. And because I am writing in a Western context, there's one side that you want to write about. That is the side that Westerners want to write, which is like our side, so to speak. And I didn't want to write a book where it was that easy, which is to say, one of the characters coming from a religious background becoming more secular and one going through the exact opposite trajectory. But I didn't want it to seem as if one of those trajectories was better or worse than the other. I want to write them both as characters who seriously investigated their spirituality in a way that was important to them. It was deeply personal. These are characters who know exactly who they are. They have no confusion about their cultural identity, their place in the world, but they do have difficulty with reconciling how they are connected with God, if at all. And I think for me, that is good fodder for fiction. And it's something that's done in Western editions also. Graham Greene, who's a novelist I always cite in reference to my book, somebody who converted to Catholicism, became a lapsed Catholic, but also really investigated how his characters actually reconciled their Catholicism with the prosaic, worldly, profane lives that they had to lead. And I wanted to do something very similar with my characters, albeit from a Muslim perspective. I hope that was successful, and I hope that it had a bit of, within that specificity, there's also a universality that anybody from any background could kind of approach.
Yeah, I love that. And the idea that religious texts are very poetic and that, they've been interpreted a certain way by certain people, but that it's still up for interpretation by the individual and not directed by anyone else. Thank you. Teri. Family. It was very big for me, as I mentioned, is at the heart of living expenses. The sisterhood, the mom, the relationships. Although you explore many issues around infertility, what the family really felt like the beating heart of the novel for me, because it was more than a baby that Laura was after. She wanted family. She wanted that unit replicated, and I wanted you to talk about that a little bit more with everybody.
I love writing about family. My last novel, Escape Plans, was also about a very small family, mother, father, and their only child. And so I didn't set out to write another book about a small family, but then that's what happened. So in this case in particular, I really love the idea of sisters and sisterhood. I'm an only child, so I do not have any siblings. So I like thinking about siblings. So I love it when you made that comment about how it reminds you of you and your sister. I've had other people say that because I'm like, yes, okay, good. I did capture something about siblings, but it was a way for me to write about that. But also I just wanted to write about the single mother raising her two children, which that's what a lot of this book is about. So I wanted to write about that. And then I just also wanted to write about the idea of what it means when you want to expand your family and why people make that decision. And I really wanted to just focus on that one area. The whole book is truly about Laura trying to get pregnant. And it just captures that period. There's not much more before, there's not anything after. I really wanted to write about what thought process someone is going through when they have consciously decided that that's what they want to do next. So it was fun to explore in that way because it is a narrow amount of time and it's such an in-between kind of waiting period that is often the most boring part of things. No one really wants to write about or read about waiting, but I wanted to try to challenge myself to make it kind of interesting. So that was really what I set out to do with this book. Yeah.
Each of you in different ways explore human connection. the value we place on our relationship to others, to family, to community, to religion, to ourselves, and what it means when there's disconnection. And I wanted you to each share a bit more about what you wanted to explore about connection in your work.
Who wants to start?
Just
I
hold
mean,
the mic
you know what?
hold up in the air.
I have it. I might as well just like dive into it. The sense of connection or lack of connection was central to this book, and kind of going back to what we've been talking about, it's several layers of connection. These are characters who, in their own ways, are profoundly wounded, either because of mental illness or grief, but also, I think, because of this profound alienation they have from their environment. And that's not because they are people who are completely unable to connect, but there's always something missing in that. And it's one of the reasons why, like, having, you know, that spiritual love that I talked about earlier was very important, because that is kind of the overarching form of love that they're trying to reconcile themselves with. So Murad, somebody who's coming from a very religious background, at one point in time felt connected to God, and then that connection just petered out of him, which is one of the reasons why he wanted to find fulfillment through a very worldly, more tangible, more physical love with Sophie. And Sophie, somebody who we learned early on lost her brother and is coming from a broken home, finds herself leading more towards the spiritual love that Murad had and lost because of her. It's a way of anchoring her to, ironically, the world, even though we're talking about another worldly love. And I think there's very, like, various different types of connection that they're trying to find is where the inherent drama is for me entering the ocean. And it's up for the reader, for those who are willing to read it, to see towards the end of the book whether they actually find that connection. For my opinion, I think that they do find a bit of grace with their losses, and how they kind of absorb the loneliness of their lives with the fact that they are more connected to the world and with each other than they realized. That's me being slightly more optimistic than I usually am. But that's a hope, at the very least, with this particular book. Right, there we go.
So in Living Expenses, there's sort of like a foregone conclusion that, you know, the main character, Laura, has this connection with her sister. She has this very close connection with her husband, who's also a high school sweetheart, and then her mother, because they've all grown up together so closely. And so what I really wanted to write about was what happens when you have the connection and then feel so suddenly a point in your life disconnected from all of those people. So suddenly, you know, Claire, her sister that she felt like she knew everything about, has moved away to San Francisco and is, you know, even asking her like, why do you want to have kids? And it's hard to explain to her sister why that's happening. Her mother, who has been a single mom her whole life, is suddenly like dating and, you know, trying to explore the world with relationships. And then her husband, who she's also known for so long and knows so well, they're also just at different points in how they're processing all of their fertility issues. And so there is a lot of isolation in that feeling, and I wanted to write about that. But with ultimately knowing that hopefully there was this kind of cushion of connection between all of them. And ultimately, I wanted to show that they are still connected despite having these problems every so often in their lives.
I'm glad you said that about sort of these imperfect connections, because I think that was at the root of what I wanted to explore in Born as well. And in the context of a public high school classroom where you have people who are so very different coming together in this kind of sphere and you know, hopefully learning together, there has to be a certain amount of sort of grace extended. And I think in many ways we live in an age where we don't allow for that grace, or we want all of our connections to be perfect or to fall within certain lines. And we don't allow for, or we don't forgive misunderstanding or try and work our way past it. And so very much I wanted to sort of, explore that and show that people can misunderstand each other and maybe not get each other perfectly and still work together towards a common goal and still learn from each other. So that, the connection was really, really, really important, I think, in terms of community. And I did want it to be a story about community, that it wasn't only about one voice, that all of these voices were important and worthwhile. And, it's a big mess, but at the end, well.
Thank you. So entrapment, I think it's easy to see, Heather with Born, the symbolism of entrapment, but each of your characters in many ways are trapped. Laura, she's trapped in a body that is functioning for one purpose only, it seems, and that is to get pregnant. Elise is giving birth too, but is also physically locked down. And Saad, you write about Murad and this emptiness that is trapped inside his body, something that can't be filled, something he doesn't believe will ever be filled. And I would love for each of you to expand on the idea of entrapment.
One of the ways, so Elise is definitely, of course, physically entrapped in this classroom, and that is the sort of drama of the situation that she's in, but on a more like both deep and broad level, she's entrapped, I would say, by her role as a caregiver, and so as a mother and a teacher, and what that means. And part of I sort of alluded to this before, but part of what I wanted to get at was this idea that, she had this rich life outside of her role as teacher and mother. And there were a lot of sort of what ifs in her life, or her life could have been different if she went down this road, or if she acted differently. And the fact that the entrapment is, I mean, maybe there's a softer word for it, and maybe that's part of it. Maybe connection and entrapment are two sides of the same coin. That being a parent is feels extremely constricting a lot of the time, and you give up a lot of freedoms to care for other people, and yet it can also have an amazing expansive quality. So.
I can go next. Yeah, I think from my perspective, Murad and Sophie are both entrapped in themselves in different ways. I think from Murad, it's slightly more obvious because he's going through clinical depression. And if anybody's gone through clinical depression knows that it is a condition that fundamentally traps you within yourself. And he does, even if he's aware of it, it's very difficult for him to get out of it. I think that's one of the reasons why with Murad he veers away from religion, because God seems so abstract to him at this point, and he can't reach the divine within him to kind of get him out of this morass that he finds himself in. But he does get that through Sophie, and Sophie is, for him a way of she's a branch while he's in the quicksand. And I think for somebody like Sophie, her being trapped is also somewhat similar in as much as she's dealing with grief. She's dealing with this profound sadness and loss that she can't see her way out of. And unlike Murad, who wants something much more worldly, it's the otherworldly that is her lifeline to getting out of this box that she finds herself trapped that she finds herself boxed into. And that's part of the drama and the contrast that for me is really interesting artistically with this story, that you have two people who are actually not that dissimilar, who see different ways of trying to get themselves out of whatever is suffocating them at an emotional level. And it's fortunate and both unfortunate they meet each other, because they see each other in different ways, and you have to kind of read the novel to get what I mean by this, as lifelines for each other. but it doesn't quite work out the way they want to. And for me, that's also artistically very interesting as well.
You're right. I did want to write about what it feels like to be trapped in a body. I think we've all experienced that, regardless of in this particular case, it's about someone trying to get pregnant, but that feeling of when you've been living your life and then suddenly something happens and you're like, oh, I have a body. And now because of this body, I cannot keep on living the way I want to. So Laura's relatively young as well. So it's kind of the first time in her life where it's like, oh, things aren't working out the way they're supposed to, which is always, a humbling moment in everyone's life. But she's just also trapped in this time period because she does want to get on with her life and feels like she needs this one thing to kind of move on with the rest of your life, but can't. And so in the meantime, she needs to just continue living her life and find ways to cope with it. And so I wanted to, address what that's like when you just have this pause in your life, but time marches on, and what she does to kind of deal with it, which is sometimes not great, sometimes hard, but that's just what you have to do.
I have a couple more questions. I don't know if anyone else has any questions. If not, I'll just continue. Okay. I always feel so selfish. I have more than two questions. So I wanted to, these are very writerly questions and I apologize, but I hope that these questions bring out things in the book that make you all want to run out and buy them. But I want to talk about character development. Each of you in some way have touched on this, but and Heather and I talk about this all the time, the impossibility of curating books with similar themes. But for each of you, there is a mirror to your own life in many ways. And I wanted to talk to you about character development, specifically in developing characters that are like you in many ways, but unlike you in many ways, and the maybe complex overlapping of that.
So I came up with a character of Laura and her sister Claire a long time ago. Like I mentioned earlier, I really wanted to write about siblings and sisters, and I wanted to write about a fracture in a close relationship. So I had many drafts where I had Laura and Claire growing up over their life, where something happened. One of them, Claire, literally disappeared and we didn't know where she was. I just was very obsessed with these characters and knew I wanted to write about them. At the same time, I had started going through my own fertility journey, and I really wanted to write about that experience. I couldn't find a lot of writing about it at the time. It was, 10, 12 years ago. There's a lot more now, but I couldn't find anything. And I was writing sometimes personal essays, sometimes I thought about writing poetry, and I'm not even a poet. And then I realized I had these two characters, and I thought, oh, this would be such a great framework to put these two characters into, with one of them kind of going through this and the other person just trying to understand it. And as soon as I figured that out, the rest of the book kind of, unfurled. It was really great to come up with that moment and realize I had a container for it. I think that's one thing. I'm the kind of writer who likes to think about ideas and the characters, and it's the plot part that's hard. And so when you find that oh, this will be the trajectory, that feels really good. It still took a really long time after I figured that out, but once I got that, at least I knew who the characters were. And I think with that base, it made the rest of the book not easier, but at least I could then concentrate on the rest of the book.
Well, this is going to be a really hard question to answer. So whenever I speak about this book, generally speaking, I'm really cagey about how autobiographical it is. So, but you guys are going to get, something really special I haven't said before. So you're going to get a different layer of all of this. So
Make sure it's recording.
yeah, buckle up, guys. So usually when I talk about this book, I always talk about how Murad and Sophie are both within me. And I kind of see them as, almost beloved friends of mine. And it's very typical of writers, assuming that they're not writing, completely awful people, that they often see, their characters as children that they nurture. I don't see Murad and Sophie as children so much as I see them as, my contemporaries, my peers, people that I actually look up to in odd ways. Beneath all of that, though, there's obviously, I mean, not obviously, but let me just rip the band-aid. There's obviously, for me, at the very least, an autobiographical element to it. You can see Murad as an analog for me. You can see Sophie as an analog for somebody I knew once a long time ago. It's really weird because the person that I'm talking to actually contacted me about this book last week. Yeah, I'm telling you guys, you're getting a soap opera right now. She liked it. But at the same time, I wanted to write completely fictional characters. And I did not want people to read this book and assume that Murad is me or Sophie is this person. Because, and I mean this when I say this, they're both me. They're both, representing aspects of me also. But the beautiful thing about fiction is it allows this beautiful veil that I can put on the characters to give a sense of mystery for those people who know me, to be like, so is that really Saad? Or Sophie really this other person? Because quite honestly, it's not that important.
Yeah.
When you're writing fictional characters, they exist in their own realm, far divorced from our realities. And Murad and Sophie have taken the life of their own for whomever actually reads this book. And I'm glad for that, because like I said, if people really want to know about my inner life, I mean, I guess you can read this book and figure it out. But at the same time, and I'm not saying this with a bit of false modesty, I'm not that important. I genuinely believe that Murad and Sophie are more important than me when people read this book. And their stories, I don't want it to be just my story. I want them to be in a position where they can connect with anybody. And they can only connect with anybody if they are removed from who I am as a person. So when I was writing this story, I made it a point to kind of see, think of situations that may have happened to me and fictionalize them, or aspects of the personalities that ring true with me, but I can fictionalize them because I want to write self-contained characters that exist in their own right. Again, I hope that there's something successful about that. And I hope that there is something that, other people can latch onto, because I do want people to find as much affection in them as I have with them. I don't know what you guys think about me. I'm just kidding. But like I said, that for me as an artist is the supreme goal.
I feel like I need a minute just to absorb that. So this novel started a long time ago, probably when I was pregnant with my second, who's now 14. And I did have a situation where I was heavily pregnant, teaching and in a lockdown. So of course I started thinking, oh my God, what would happen if I went into labor now? Who would help me and how long would it last, etc. So that was kind of the little spark. But then it took me a long time to figure out how I wanted to tell that story. And at first, the story was mostly from Elise's point of view. And then I realized that, for one thing, the story couldn't only be told for her point of view because she'd be out of her mind, because she'd be in labor. And so I needed other people to kind of fill in those gaps. And also that the story I wanted to tell was a story of community and not about single voices, and how that sort of community came together. I will also say that I think, most writers, in order to build character, they need to find a way in. They need to find something that maybe, as I read in that section, I read, a little sort of overlap, a way that your experience is similar to someone else's, and therefore you have that connection. And so I think that for all of the characters in the book, although sort of biographically speaking, Elise is most like me in that way, but in terms of experiences, Anthony, who's mentally ill, and he's the cause of the lockdown. I share some very sort of deeply, disturbing things with him in terms of my kind of experience with mental health, and how, especially, I think sometimes they talk about, writers writing what they know. Sometimes I think, for me anyway, I don't write what I know, I write what I yearn. So part of what Anthony's yearning is to find someone who maybe understands and validates what he's going through and is not frightened of him. And I think that was very much an experience I had when I was struggling, that I needed to find someone who wasn't frightened of me and could, in fact, listen to me in a way that didn't make things worse. So that, I think there's lots of different ways I find myself into all of those just different characters, experiences, despite, what I would call, for one of a better term, like their skin suits, what they look like from the outside.
So much. I'm going to leave it there just because my structural question is whatever. But I just wanted to say, in talking about spirituality with Saad's book, Intrusive Thoughts has been a conversation I've been having for the last couple of weeks with my daughter. I think it's the final frontier in our understanding of mental illness. I know in particular with postpartum depression, people are, they don't like talking about it at all, but I appreciate the book for that reason. And I just want to say structurally, my question is that, to answer my own question, each of these books is structured in such a unique and interesting way. I was surprised when we got Sophie's perspective and all of the seasons in Teri's book. And Cheyenne, I told you this, Heather, personally is honestly the character you want on a desert island with you at some point. But thank you so much, each of you. We'll have time for you guys to chat with them and get books signed. I'm going to raffle off books. If you haven't bought any raffle tickets, I'll give you a couple of minutes to do that, but I will hand this microphone over to you while I run back and get the raffle tickets.
Thank you.
Five minutes to stand up, ready to go.
Yeah.
Real tight five.
I think you're good, Regina. Thought you were gonna have like a before sunset moment. I don't know if you did those movies.
I have, and I would like you, they did influence.
Oh my god, I just got to watch them. It's like those are my favorite movies. So
I love it because again, like this is the structure of
yeah.
them.
Yeah.
I haven't seen before.
Oh, it's so good. Last year at the theater on Hudson, they did a trilogy of the 3 movies all in a row. It was a marathon all.
Yeah.
I survived.
You survived. You haven't seen that. I'm sure. Wow, there are some of these so good.
Yeah, I had great. Especially before the sun rises. Because I saw that about the time when this was produced. And there's something about how like that story in my life.
Yeah.
That kind of enters into this.
Right.
So I might be mentioning that because people always ask me to do this story. I completely forgot that I think
Yeah. When you mentioned that right at the end of like that flashing or two, there's talking at the Shakespeare company.
Yeah, exactly. There's a long story about how that actually is parallel.
Oh my god, I can't wait to read it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. But you know what? My parents have a lot of my things, but I was like, I chose this section. Reading from my parents.
Exactly. Like you have to be really careful about these things.
Okay. sort of, or like.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, we have a great Edmund too. Still answer. I think so it wasn't necessarily kind of as attractive as.
That's actually your show.
Oh,
He's like,
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. So they have just so many readings, they always do the same part. I told them reading the part that you need to go 12 times.
and I was gonna say, I mean, the parents aren't here, but also the players aren't here.
Wow, I really, this morning, I was thinking I was practicing, it's like, oh, this is for
Like a long thing.
I know that.
I'm always fascinated by stories. I always start reading the same thing.
Yeah.
Over and over again.
Yeah.
There's some, it's always.
So, yeah.
It's always.
So I mean, I was doing the same thing every time, we were in different locations, and it was really interesting to the book. That's what. And also then, what's your plan? Have it all like, you know, yeah, you know, later days where I had to hear it.
Well, yeah, like
Yeah.
your normal, it's like a. I don't want to say general.
Yeah.
Shawnee too.
But I mean, I've never seen. I've never seen people like family laugh so hard. Have you ever heard reading before? So,
I have a first 30 with John. He's a comedian, but he wrote a book about curling. Like beside myself excited to talk to him about that. It's been a so I'm not gonna have to like do a lot of curling. I don't know. I'm not feeling at it. But
Well, I hope you
I feel like
how long do you think it'll take?
that I just wait for it.
There's a curling club near our house, and I always think about it. It always seems like it's
Like when you spend a year.
Okay. So
Because
it's between the park.
I think there's only like one.
Same one.
Yes, it's one. So my book is his daughter. Get beer.
I love that. Is it?
Is, yeah, like, I told my mother that I didn't want to.
And they were all like,
So, no, honestly,
I'm a sterling person this far east of Seattle.
It's kind of. That's how I actually know so little about this. But it's
Yeah.
somebody I've worked for before, but like, so the thing is, like, there's no like listing per se. Yeah. I know, right?
I should just be.
Yeah, exactly. But it's why.
But I'm spending so much time like sleeping and stuff. It's like, you haven't done before. It's like, yeah, it's fun.
Although I also was not expecting. I think it's like I like going to an office, but like I just need to really adjust it to. Well, my old. That's why I love biking my old office.
Okay, here we go. So the first books I am raffling off are Sarah Flemington's R.I.P. Scoot. The first three are loved books, previously loved books. I do take care of them when I read them, but Sarah Flemington's R.I.P. Scoot, based in Toronto, it is a spectacularly unique and interesting book. Martha Bailey's There Is No Blue, beautiful sisters, Teri in this, it's incredible. And Rachel Phan's Restaurant Kid. And then this Lucy Ian Black is coming to Junction Reads in April, I think, but I got a bonus copy of this, so I'm just for anybody. Nadine E. And these are the 3 books here today. Vanessa L. And that is it. Thank you so much for coming. We are back here December. I did not write that down. December 7th. Sorry. But I have a virtual conversation with Shani Mutu on November 23rd that you can join via Zoom. And then on November 27th, I have an Instagram live chat with John Cullen, a comedian, talking about curling. And that is it. Again, thank you so much, everyone, for coming. Thank you, everyone online, for coming. Thank you, Kaylee. Thank you, Jess. Thank you, Heather, Teri, and Saad. Again, that's it.